But the silver market and the platinum market are both kind of hanging on how much demand there is for physical and how quickly it can be delivered and how quickly it could be delivered in the right place.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 3rd through November 10th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 10-ounce silver Buffalo bars are just $3.49 over spot per ounce. Next, 2025 2-ounce silver Canadian Rockies coins are $4.49 over spot per ounce. 1-ounce gold Rand refinery bars are just $135 over spot. Finally, pre-33 XF $5 gold Liberty are only $45 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. I'm privileged to introduce this guest who scarcely needs an introduction. David Morgan, also referred to as the Silver Guru, author of multiple books on the subject and the author of the Morgan Report, joins us this Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. David, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Dunnigan, it's good to be back. Thank you.
We rely on your seasoned and expert opinion of and observations of the silver markets, but the fundamentals behind the markets, and frankly, even the societal and geopolitical and economic fundamentals that are driving the big ship that we're on together, and helping us to see through your eye of experience and your studied view of what's going on behind the scenes. So first, let's just talk for a moment about the silver markets. Things have been rather volatile and exciting for the past month or so. Could you bring us up to date on what you've been watching in the silver markets? And then we're going to get to some underlying phenomenon that are driving behind that.
I think one of the bigger fundamentals that I don't think it's overlooked, but I don't think it's been emphasized, is really kind of the two sides of the silver market. I mean, the silver market, as I think all of Liberty and Finance viewers know, is a derivatives market, as is many of the commodities. I mean, it's driven off of speculators and commercials and trading funds, trading advisors, commodity trading advisors, known as CTAs, that really settle on a contract, and those contracts, about 99% of the time, in almost every commodity, are a paper exchange. You win, I lose. It's a zero-sum game. For every winner, there's a loser, and vice versa. So the point I want to make about the physical market is myself and many, many others, Ted Butler and on, have said there will be a time, and there have been times already, where the physical market will dictate or overrule or take precedence over the paper market. And we've seen that happen more often in the retail side. I mean, if you look at some of the times Andy Schechtman has said, you know, I'm really having a tough time sourcing silver. There was a time, I forget what year it was, Andy probably will remember better than me, but he was having trouble. Mike Maloney said the same thing. With Andy, I connected him with a Pyromet, which Pyromet was a group that was doing commercial only. They never did know about the retail silver market. That's how kind of chambered it can be. And so I connected them together, and they started making, you know, investment grade bars, which they'd never done. And actually their markup was a little better than what they're getting for a lot of their commercial product, which is bead and mesh and, you know, shot and all the things that the commercial manufacturers of the silver industry do. And so I just want to lay that background to make this an important statement. We're at a time now, and to the best of my knowledge, and, you know, I've got 40 plus years in the, you know, in the investment situation, primarily around the resource sector, where the dominance is in the commercial bars. So we've seen a congestion in the retail side a few times. It usually subsides after a while, the market clears. But now it's where these 1,000-ounce bars are not getting put in the right place at the right time. And that really is the silver market. I mean, the derivatives market is not based on 100-ounce bars or monster boxes or constitutional silver. It's based upon commercial 1,000-ounce bars. And if those are tight, then we really kind of can go back to what I said initially. It is the silver itself that's driving the market. And that's what we've witnessed. And really, again, to repeat, I think it bears repeating. I have not seen it at least not at the level we've had basically my entire time in the markets. Mine is showing up very scarcely here or there. We got a little backwardation, but it lasted maybe a couple days, but not like we've seen lately. And that gives me encouragement because that really is the nexus of how you determine, quote unquote, the silver market.
In addition to the 1,000-ounce bar shortages, we've heard of flows of metal across the Atlantic both ways. We've heard of scrambles for physical deliveries, off-taking from the COMEX. Can you point to any specific examples that underlie what you're describing right there about shortage in the 1,000-ounce bars?
Yeah, and this is debatable. There's others that disagree, but from everything I could determine, the flow from London into the COMEX was started by the tariff scare. And then it morphed into an arbitrage. So more and more was fed than probably would have ever gone without, the tariff scare morphing into, let's say, an arbitrage. Now, some people claim gold moved that way as well. Again, tariffs, in my opinion. And then others say, well, it was because, America was repatriating their gold, maybe repatriating their silver. Perhaps I won't rule that out because I don't know for 100%. But what happened as far as the silver market is concerned is the COMEX is pretty much at, full to the brim as far as the amount of inventory they have in the COMEX warehouses. And that's roughly 500 million ounces. Now, there's two categories, as most of your viewers or listeners know, eligible and registered. Eligible is long-term investors. It has to have a medallion. It has to be signed in order to move into the register and be sold. So most of it's just resting there, storing their silver, storing it at a COMEX warehouse. But the registered has been as low as 30 million ounces a few times, and that's always kind of perked me up. Like, that's not much inventory that's readily available in commercial bars to meet the market demand. Even though it's only a small percentage of the derivatives market, it's still there. And so, as we've seen, there's more and more demand coming out of the COMEX for physical delivery. But nonetheless, we have a pretty good inventory in the registered category for silver at the COMEX. Well, now what's happened is there's a demand coming out of the LBMA, and it's an association, not an exchange, which is a difference. You can look it up. But basically, they still have to produce physical silver. And now they're short, meaning short as in the forwards that they do, which are like futures, but they're not an exchange. So the point being that they need the metal, they need it now. So they're willing to pay a premium to get it. That looks like it has subsided somewhat. As far as we know, public data, 29 million ounces is shipped over from New York back to London, and the market has calmed down, but yet it looks like it's at that trigger point again, or could be soon. There's a couple of things. The lease rates have backed off. The spread between the spot market and a futures delivery, or a forward, as it's called in the LBMA, is still there, but it's in the pennies, not in the dollars. So the best I can determine, it's quelled, it's calmed down. It maybe hasn't been completely satisfied, but it looks like it may. And there are others that say that there's a delay, meaning that some of the silver that has calmed the market down in physical form has been leased. And the lease is a short lease time, like a 3-month time frame. And within that 3 months, that silver needs to go back to, purportedly from China. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'm saying I don't know for a fact. I try to be, my engineer in me is always trying to be fact. But some of the stuff, you don't have facts. You've got, circumstantial evidence, as they would say. But that makes sense to me. That could be that situation. What I do know is the setup as far as the amount of percentage to go into a squeeze again is high. It's not like a very low probability. It's a rather high probability. But it's not guaranteed, obviously. So I'm kind of long-winded, but I think, you asked a question, being in here, I'm going to paint you as accurate a picture as I possibly can. But the silver market and the platinum market are both kind of hanging on how much demand there is for physical and how quickly it can be delivered and how quickly it could be delivered in the right place.
For those who have been paying attention for a long time, years or decades, this has been rather exciting because there's been a long-awaited anticipation of this kind of physical reality asserting itself in and basically displacing the apparently infinite elasticity of virtual demand and supply that's been able to be synthetically pretended about in the derivatives market. When it gets physical, all of a sudden things get very real. We've seen that happen a few years ago in the nickel market. We've seen it again in platinum. Any analogies you have observed recently in other metals where suddenly it became very physical and very real, and how the world adjusted to those physical crises?
Not really recently. I mean, the palladium market was quite a story. I won't repeat it. I've done it on several interviews, but it's very interesting when the physical takes control of the market price. In almost every case I can recall, it's obvious. I mean, no one can deny it. The problem with me is that it gets settled either in the paper side or the exchange itself will take over and make the determination, even though I have to look at the contract. I was going to say, even though they really at contract weren't allowed to do so, I won't make that statement. I have to double check. But it's interesting when things get really tight, the exchange steps in, like in the Hunt Brothers, like what happened to palladium, what happened to the nickel market. It's like, dang it, here's the contract, and you're not obeying it. Why not? Of course, it's probably a weasel clause or under force majeure or these conditions. We can do whatever we say we want to do in order to quiet down the market. And I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to do it on my weekly update this week if I remember. But a lot of these holding metal for accounts that have been proven to be otherwise. There was one with Morgan Stanley, and I can prove it. I've got it on my desktop here. And these people get punished with paper, but they should be punished with silver. In other words, if I've supposedly stored all this silver for my client base, and I never even had a vault, and I charge them for storage, which is what happened in this case, when that comes to court, it shouldn't be settled for, it's this price of silver, because people buy silver and gold to not have paper. So why should they be able to settle in paper? And the second point is, why don't they treat the people that have done wrong the same way that the Hunt brothers were treated? The Hunt brothers were basically expelled from ever trading silver again for the rest of their lives. So now these entities that have been fined again and again and again, some not spoofing, I'm talking about, putting silver in a vault and saying it's there and never having any silver and never having a vault. Why aren't they expelled from having silver? No, one of these is now recommending a 20% weighting in silver. Well, are you going to trust them again to buy the silver and vault it for you? So I'm going to make a video on that. But I get a little agitated because my big picture is to be, to teach and empower people to understand the benefits of an honest monetary system, honest. And if the whole thing about gold and silver is honest money, and it's not the only thing, and it's kind of, one of my tenets, and not for everybody. Some look at it as investments, some look at it as insurance. I don't care how you look at it. My point being, if there's not honesty in any of the financial markets, especially the one that purports to be outside the system and protection, and the most on this is being moved around like that, it's very, very disheartening. And yet it's happened again and again and again. It'll probably happen again in the future.
Reminds me, and this is a far out analogy, but reminds me back when you hear of people fleeing corruption and financial oppression that was generational in Europe to go to America, the land of hope and opportunity and equality, and they get off the boat in New York Harbor, and right away there's a shyster they're trying to sell into the Brooklyn Bridge. So, fallen human nature is everywhere you look, so you've got to be very careful who you're dealing with. You mentioned along the way you should do a documentary about this latest expose you just described to us. What about the documentary that you just released very recently? We've been working on it for a long time. You've talked to us multiple occasions about it. Tell us, it's out now. Where can people find out about it, and what will they learn by watching this documentary?
Yeah, it's called Silver Sunrise. It's for free. It's on YouTube. All you have to do is go to silversunrise.tv and hit the little arrow and it'll play. It takes an hour and a half long. Talks about overcoming the fear, stress, and control that the money masters have over us. There's a lot of ideas about the energy markets, the banking system, and self-realization. In other words, being more responsible for yourself and what you can control, what you cannot control. And so I left the comments open. I usually don't. Most have been favorable. Some have been, spot on. I always welcome the criticism. I don't like it, even at my age. Most of the time I take it well. One guy rightfully said, well, you should have said, currency and not money. And I get his point, but he's educated. For someone watching this film for the first time, they need to hear the word money as far as I'm concerned, because if I make it, but he made a good point. And there's others that have come subtly. And whether I go on from here or not, done good, I'm not sure. Will I make a sequel? I'm not sure. First thing I really want to do is get it out to the market and wait maybe a couple more months, maybe interview some of the people that were in the film, and maybe interview, shows like yours after you've watched it and say, hey, critique me. If I interviewed you for, what's the number one or two things that you would say would be the most beneficial to, humanity, citizenry, public at large, what would it be? And because everybody's got an idea of how we can be better. But for me and my work, it's always pretty much geared around the monetary system because it's got so much control over everyone, especially in the political class where most of our Congress critters and senatards are bought and paid for. And it's unfortunate because our ideals are much higher than that. And that's the way we were purportedly founded. And I do believe that it's never been, as you stated earlier, to reinforce what you said, the human condition is never going away. So from the first Congress till this one, there's been corruption, there's been illicit behavior, but I believe strongly that at other times, it's not been as pervasive as it is now. Go back to the Roman Empire. I really think it's functioned as a republic for many, many years. And then the debasement of the currency started, and the debasement of the moral structure of the society started to debase as well.
Yeah, certainly in the U.S., we've had, at least since Will Rogers has commented early in the 1900s about having the best Congress that money can buy. It's certainly been recognized by critics, and that's been going on for a long time. In the face of that, we have ordinary moms and pops watching our channel and others trying to do the right thing by just opting out of the corrupt nature of the system, no longer trusting the banks as a storehouse of their wealth, realizing that nothing in the bank belongs to them, not trusting the dollar, realizing that the buck ain't worth what it used to be, and it's just a melting ice cube, as Andy likes to call it, rather than a way of preserving and protecting your future. You and I were talking just before we got started, and you alluded to that theme just a moment ago about the further degradation of a society that was based on honoring the rule of law and of even common law, which you've discussed here before, about talking about the whole basis for civil law and criminal law, what the bases of those are, and how they're rooted in tradition that goes way back, way before the founding of the United States. And yet we see unmistakably increases in desperate behavior, whether it's on the investing public or whether it's people driving cars into hosts of podcasts and things. The idea that perhaps many people are feeling more and more desperate, and they're acting more and more desperate, and there can be, I wanted to get your opinion on this. At the highest levels of the food chain in society, we see this class, like as you mentioned, investment bankers and so on, who seem to be beyond, they're with impunity. They're just doing without correction, and that's at the political class. It's the financial class. It seems to be above this glass ceiling where there's no consequences to illegal behavior, and the people that lesson is not missed on those in the cheap seats. Going, wait a minute, if the highest echelons are not getting published for big illegal behaviors, maybe I can get away with it on a small side. But there's definitely this feeling of being behind enemy lines, or in a being subject to a system that's no longer working for the ordinary person, and therefore some people thinking that they have to dash and dart and bend and break the rules just to try to survive because it's in a hostile environment. You describe the decline of empires such as the Roman Empire in your previous documentary, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and perhaps in this latest one as well. How much of that do you believe is due to the perception by the common people that they are in a hostile environment that really at the highest levels is not obeying the rule of law? So why should they sacrifice at their level of in their realm of living in order to try to get ahead, and rather than just ditching it and acting desperately? And where does that lead society when that happens?
Yeah, well, it leads to revolution eventually. And the problem is that some people, when a very small percentage catches on, not much can take place. And it doesn't take that big a percentage to understand it, where it starts to become pushback. So what we see is that more and more people see that the way we're taught in school is it's the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. But when they see the same rules and laws and there's a class that gets away with it, they've got to have money for a good lawyer, or they're in a political class, or they're exempt, or they put up the idea that it's based on national security and therefore we can do whatever we want. And all these memes that are out there that prevent the establishment of what I just said, the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. So then society starts to break down because you start to see what takes place. Thinking on that topic a little more, when I was in high school, we had to read 1984, Animal Farm, and Brave New World. And all of those three books actually were pointing way back then to where we're at now. And the Animal Farm, one of my favorite quotes is, all animals are created equal, except some animals are more equal than others. Well, there you go. There's a political class. And then, of course, the Orwellian, so many themes out of George Orwell, but, speaking the truth in times of universal deceit is a revolutionary act. And it is. Look at what happened on the internet with channels like, mine was never taken down, but I've been shadow banned for years. But regardless, something wasn't politically correct, you're out. Didn't meet our guidelines. Well, what are your guidelines? In a free speech society, why do you have to call it hate speech? It may be hateful, but it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to speak it. So on and on it goes. I could go on, but I think it's the answer is it doesn't take many to start. And then it's sort of like a contagion. Like, doggone, that guy, messed with me or whatever. It doesn't have to be a moral situation. So let me explain that. It could be financial. So your plumber comes out that you haven't seen in 3 years, and he fixed the toilet he fixed last time, and the bill last time was $60, now it's $180. And you confront him and you say, well, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. This is triple what you charged me last time. And that inflation, man. Now it really cost him $100, but he bumped it up to $180 because everybody else is. So that's where the inflation really takes off, because he expects that the next time he goes to buy a work truck or insurance for his business or new tools or whatever, the cost is going to be much greater. So he's making sure he can pay for them, and then he's padding it a little bit. If you follow what I'm trying to convey here. So that goes on to when the carpenter comes over to, fix the plumber's roof. So what I'm trying to say is it's first of all, it's a psychological thing, just like it's okay to cheat. And it doesn't necessarily happen in a way that's directly affecting us as far as, stealing from each other or hurting someone. It can be just in the financial realm where I'm going to get mine. Everybody look at, I need, and that attitude. So it's uncertainty. People hate uncertainty. They want to be able to count on, my word is my bond, and you told me it's going to cost me this, and this was going to cost. And even, I'll go one step further, I digress, but even like on, buying tickets to something, it costs $100. And then you go to check out, and it's a handling fee, a shipping fee, approve your signature fee, and it's a Tuesday fee. And by the time you get done, it's $140 for that $100 ticket. It drives me nuts. That happens all the time.
Well, I think a big picture of what you just talked about can be summarized in the dishonest money leads to other dishonest behavior, especially if the leaders who are causing the dishonest money are dishonest about that. And there's a lot of deflection. And Biden kept saying, oh, it's corporate greed. It's corporate greed. And you're saying that the guy says, well, it's the bucket, I'm going to have higher replenishment costs. And that's true. But everybody's pointing over here and over there at the prices, either people demanding higher wages or the retailers or the manufacturers demanding higher. And nobody's looking at the emperor behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, who's debasing the dishonest money, rather than people wouldn't be having any of these conversations if we were on honest money. Any final thoughts from you on that?
Well, I just did an essay a couple of months ago, I believe. It was called When Money Lies, Freedom Dies. And Mike Maloney just did a one-on-one with Alan Hibbard, which is with him on his podcast, which he does, I don't know how many a week. I think he does one almost daily. And they went through the essay kind of line by line. Alan read it to Mike. Mike hadn't read it, but they were doing it basically live. And it was a pretty nice compliment to me, but I meant every word of that essay. There is a direct correlation between, honest money and an honest society. Doesn't make it perfect, but it certainly makes it a lot better. And the last point Mike made, and that is in an honest money system, a dollar earned, a dollar saved, a dollar earned is a dollar saved, or a dollar saved is a dollar earned. So if I earn $1 at 20, at 40, that dollar will buy me the same goods and services, and really slightly more, because the productivity of the human gets better and better. You make a better mousetrap, as the old adage goes, but you do. So things improve, you find better ways to make it more economic to, saw wood or paint or whatever, it just gets better and better. There's a limit on things, but that dollar is actually more valuable. So we have what's called a slight deflation because of the productivity and ingenuity of the human species. So a dollar at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 buys at least as much as it did when you saved it. We don't have that. Now we have a debased currency, and a dollar today is worth what? I started as a degreed engineer, working at a pretty high level as a crew member, as a flight crew member, but they had extra pay, hazard pay for flying on the airplane. But nonetheless, $6 an hour, and that was coming out of school with, every license you could get. I had, my private, my commercial, my multi-engine, my instrument rating. Flight instructor, got nominated as Flight Instructor of the Year. I didn't receive the award, but I was nominated for it. And all that stuff. And, you look at $6 an hour now, and these kids flipping hamburgers are getting, 15 or something. And but that shows you not that they're getting paid more than I was. The number's bigger than the number that I was getting, but it doesn't buy anything close to what I could buy at the $6 an hour wage.
David, you have mentioned the new document, or you've mentioned writing an article recently. People who want to follow your work on a more frequent basis, how should they get plugged in?
Well, I have two services. One's paid and one's free. So if you just go to the website, themorganreport.com, I urge you to get on the free list. The reason being is that being shadow banned, you're never going to see my feed coming up on YouTube, although I wish it would. I am not banned, I don't think, on X at Silver Guru 22. It's pretty open, although I have pushed back there a few times, but I try, I'm my own person, I'm authentic, but I also kind of know where you might be stepping over the line. So some of these topics that my brethren have had the guts to do, I don't, because it's outside of my expertise, like maybe in the medical arena. Not that I don't sympathize with them, but why would I go there? Others have done it. But nonetheless, get on the free list, because if I'm ever taken down, you'll have easy access. And I do get occasionally, specials. I mean, Andy's run things for me once in a while, and others at times. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we are always grateful for your presence here with us on Liberty and Finance. You've been with us here since the beginning, And it was great to meet you in person at multiple events as well. We're grateful that you've been helping to bring the experience of your years of study to the benefit of myself, my son, and our audience here on Liberty and Finance. And always, just on behalf of all of our viewers and subscribers, thank you for joining us.
No, my pleasure. Thank you, Denigan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for November 3rd through November 10th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 10-ounce silver buffalo bars are just $3.49 over spot per ounce. Next, 2025 2-ounce silver Canadian Rockies coins are $4.49 over spot per ounce. 1-ounce gold Rand refinery bars are just $135 over spot. Finally, pre-33 XF $5 gold Liberty are only $45 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.